Welcome back to the Everything HR's Culinary Conversations. Today we are welcoming Lydia Gwin, the owner and operator of Gwin's Tiny Kitchen. The goal of the Culinary Conversations is to speak with leaders in the restaurant world to discuss the hardships and successes they've overcome in growing their business. Gwin's Tiny Kitchen is a unique culinary venture offering a variety of food-related experiences, including cooking classes, custom products like spices, rubs, granola, and family-friendly programs. It focuses on fostering a sense of connection and discovery through food. Gwin's Tiny Kitchen also hosts events and provides engaging recipes and emphasizing the joy of gathering and exploring flavors. Their mission is to create meaningful culinary experiences for people of all ages and skill levels. Lydia, happy to have you here.
Thank you. You make that sound so lovely. You just have to do this every time.
Happy to hear. That's the goal, right? So, Lydia, just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am, lifelong lover of food, always have been. I kind of grew up really always feeding people around a table. My summers were spent on my grandparents' farm where they had a lot of farm hands. So my grandmother was always cooking and we always had a revolving door of people coming in and feeding people. So I've got to learn the joy of hospitality, the joy of like gathering around a table, definitely farm to table aspects. And then, as I grew older, I always loved what food meant, the layering of food, the culture of food, doing immersion programming, living abroad. And then eventually professionally ended up back in the restaurant business, not my college education degree diploma in hospitality, but I ended up finding my way back to it and worked in a corporate restaurant environment for over 11 years. And then when COVID happened, I sort of pivoted and started my own business. So Gwin's Tiny Kitchen is here. So we've been thriving ever since and loving every minute of it. So
that's awesome. And Gwin's Tiny Kitchen has so many things that it's doing right now. You have your podcast, you travel around the world, you try different recipes, you do a lot of unique things. What would you say is kind of your favorite aspect?
Oh, well, I think it's hard because it's an umbrella for everything. I think my favorite aspect is empowering individuals with knowledge of food, not just in like the history of food, but also just like how to get in the kitchen and understand and explore flavors. As a culinary educator, I think the one thing I notice in all of my classes is that people really get stuck to what the recipe says as opposed to understanding and pulling back to be able to kind of explore and create on their own. And then just kind of also fun this internal web that happens when you're cooking, right? Between cultures and flavor and rituals and things like that. So that gives me my greatest joy is when you see those light bulbs go off in the kids' classes to the adults that are just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And then they go home and try it. And they're like, I made it and I did it for a dinner party and they had success. So that is the greatest joy, right?
And can you break down a little bit about the actual operations themselves? Is this a one-person show? Do you have a team supporting you?
So it is a one-person show. I run the business. So my main foundation of it is culinary education. So I teach culinary classes at local cooking schools, at local schools themselves. So I work with a couple of the local high schools to work with their programming and elementary schools. So that is my main focus is culinary education. But then I've created sort of these armed services where individuals say, hey, can you come to my house and cater for me? And then do farmers markets on the weekends. And then the newest layer is travel. So on top of, doing all of these things, the big goal is to say food is that connector for everyone. Why not just take you to this location and have all of your senses immersed in the culture and the smells and the sights and the history. So yeah, it's a one-man operation. It has its moments of kind of, it's a ripple effect. So they all intertwine with each other, nice big web.
Awesome. And your background is very unique. I saw you have a lot of production experience working for really big names, Discovery, Fox, organizations like that. Do you identify anything that you learned from there that kind of helps your current organization?
Yes. So I would say everything that has happened in my past, between not only working in the restaurant business, but also my degree was in film production, and I worked in LA and in kind of in different cities. But I mean, that has helped me be able to create online programming, doing virtual classes, being able to kind of do my own graphics for my business. And then on top of it too, just kind of understanding sort of how that time management works with being able to put those things together, as well as all the marketing packets with it. And then also understanding the software, right? I think the hardest part, or maybe the most intimidating part with that platform, is there's so many options, or not understanding how to use all those options. So yeah, every aspect of my career professionally, whether it's food related or media related, has sort of all revolved and come full circle. They all kind of blend in with each other. So, and I think that that's been beneficial with being able to kind of do things, a lot of this on my own, even though I think a team would help make execution blow it up, right? Which is the next steps. But, I think for right now, the one man doing it all, it's a little tiring at times. It takes a lot. We're not able to be as 100% progressive as we'd like to with timeline, but it's a learning process. Right now, it's all about learning all the aspects and learning from the mistakes and the failures, and then being able to continue to move forward with those.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it too, because it's really, building the groundwork to then kind of scale, right? You always need that foundation. You need your standard operating procedures. You need to kind of go through the flow, find your own errors before you're actually able to bring in a team, because it's really hard to tell someone what to do if it's like the first time it's ever being done. Exactly. So I completely understand it. I think that's something that all of our users could definitely review and kind of internalize there.
Yeah.
As far as the kitchen training going, what kind of levels of training is it? Is it like more professional culinary experience? Is it like online classes? Do they come into like a studio?
Sure. So it covers all of them. Basically, a lot of what my business is customizing it to you, because I think sometimes a lot of things are very cookie cutter, and you may already know one level, and you're really striving for that next level, but you don't get it. So I'll sit down and work with you and kind of be like, where are you at? Right? We do an assessment together. And then from there, we kind of build on like, where's your interest, where's your passion, where's your skill set at, and then kind of build on that. So some of them are in person. Majority of my classes are in person now that we're kind of away. When it was COVID 2020, 2021, we did a lot of virtual. And so from there, those classes were kind of hard because I wasn't able to work and customize to your skill set or to kind of your needs, but in the same respect to really kind of making some recipes, here's an easy version, and then here's the hard version. Here's how we're going to take it to the next level, and here's how we're going to take it to the next level. And a lot of my programming is all about intertwining food and the involvement of making food with other aspects like science, understanding the science behind cooking, understanding the history behind cooking. And so I think no matter where you're at, whether you're beginning or you're professional, those aspects kind of help to kind of connect everything that the world is of food. And then I think that builds those pavement stones to the next level in excitement. They're the fun dinner party facts that you share with your guests when you come.
No, it's awesome though. Bringing a little bit more science, more technicalities into the kitchen. That's awesome.
Yeah. The question should always be why, right? Like your toddler's always like, why? Should be like that too with everything, right? Like, why do my eyes cry? Like, why do I cry when I chop an onion? Here's why. Here's what you need to do. So,
awesome. I love it. And then with the way that you guys have been working and, you being a one-person show, how do you do your marketing, or like, how do you draw your clients in?
Sure. So I think a large part of it was prior to me starting my business. I was really involved as a restaurant manager and general manager of a corporate thing. I was really involved in our community. So I think that's a big key, no matter where you're at any stage, whether you're a small business or whether you're a big corporation, that being involved in your community is key. Because it's going to bridge you to so many things. So for me, I was running, I'd been at the restaurant for 11 years, worked my way up from, banquet coordinator, host to general manager. And over that time, I really got involved with the chamber. I got involved with the local schools. I was able to kind of work with other, the TV stations for promotions, and making those connections and networking really helped me kind of thrust Gwen's Tiny Kitchen to where it is now, and me being able to maintain that. So already having that network in place and those connections in place. And so for me now, it's a matter of also still being present. So still coming to chamber meetings, still going to local communities, offering my services sometimes to, elementary school garden clubs. So then that way, because that can stem off a birthday party. Oh, hey, I really love it. My kids love coming, or camps. So you never know, what seeds you're planting when you do small events, but just making sure that, you're available and you have those conversations and you leave room for that.
Awesome. That's really powerful. I think really unique too, especially in the restaurant or the kind of the food and beverage space in general. I feel like typically a lot of the ideas is you've got to push the marketing out, paid ads, things like that to try to bring people into the space, but kind of going out, right? Doing your own networking, going out to your communities. I think that's really, really great actionable items that anyone can very easily do. I have one of our clients right now, what they do to attract people is they have networking events hosted in their restaurant. Mm-hmm. So like they will contact other organizations and like, hey, why don't you host your restaurant here? And the only like those networking events are free, but the criteria is they have to like buy a plate to be there. So that's a great tool, like a very, very simple way to get people. And then if the service is good and the food is good, then you immediately kind of build your own community from that. So I think it's a great, great way, networking outreach that I think is a little bit underutilized in the food and beverage space, but a super fantastic tool.
Yeah, and to echo that piece of it, the one thing that has always stood out for me for marketing is it's word of mouth. That is more powerful than anything that you're going to spend money on, and it's free. Right. And especially now with all of these like parent groups on Facebook or people going to social media to ask for recommendations, that's what's going to link people back to you. So I think that moment my focus when I was a general manager and working in their sort of their event marketing space was, how do we create those memories that make people want to come back? Right. The food can be great, but we latch on to more than that. It is, hey, I had a fabulous birthday experience here. Let's continue to come back. I had a great happy hour. And for me with the chamber, it's hard as a restaurant owner to be involved in business groups because their meetings are breakfast time, their lunch time. That is like their time that they network. And that's our busy time. That is our business time. And so exactly that. Like I started hosting the women's group for the chamber and bringing 30, 40 people in and doing their plated lunches and let them have their back room for free. And it evolved to many, many great connections, but then they'd bring their business in and they think, oh, hey, event space in the back. So yes, finding that way to network in is such a powerful tool for marketing more than a paid ad or a discount. The thing with discounting is you start discounting and that's what people expect. But if you have a great product and you're offering maybe a room for free, or you're saying, hey, I'll give you sort of a wonderful partnership discount, right, on a plated dinner, then that speaks more volumes than discounting a free appetizer or 50% off. I mean, they'd still work, but is it the clientele that you're wanting to bring in or that expectation of experience?
Gotcha. That's awesome. Yeah, great tips there. What would you say to someone maybe just starting out or even a veteran who's never utilized those kinds of tactics? What would you recommend for them to use to start?
I think the biggest piece is identify the clients that you want, or the group of people that you want to bring into your business, right? If you're looking for, if you have an event space in the back and you know that, hey, we really want to bring that in and really bring more people in, then reaching out to pharmaceutical reps, right? Because they're always looking for a space. They're always having, that's part of their job is building those meet and greets with doctors and pharmaceutical reps. Finding the individuals that are going to kind of pipeline you in. Some of the other things that we did is, schools and teachers, like they love food and they will be loyal to the death if you're able to feed them. And so we would do teacher appreciations, right? We would go and drop off meals at the school and just appreciate them. And, I think that also spoke volumes to them and they appreciated that. It's kind of like, you get what you give. And so I would say first identify, the clientele that you want to have come into your business. If you're looking for a higher end luxury, then you're going to the higher end places and kind of soliciting there or making network selections there. And then also figure out what you can give, because not everything, when you're working on a budget, your P&L, you got to see what you can give, because everything at the end of the day, as we know, business owners, small business owners, everything has a cost attached to it. So it's how much can you give, and how can you stretch that as much as possible. So, for me now as a small business owner, some of the things that I'll do is, I donate a chef experiences for auctions, and, they're big ticket items. They make a lot of money for these foundations, and it's a really great pool because people going to fundraisers are obviously clients that are going to come back and book private chef experiences. So that's a great way, because for me, I'm just covering my food cost. My time is free, but it's free marketing on the back end of it. And it also helps to support a really great organization too.
Awesome. I love it. So much great information there. Super, super valuable that I think anyone, like you said, anyone who's either brand new or a veteran in the game can utilize this very, very easily. One thing that I found really interesting that you said was pharmaceutical reps. That alone was such a unique idea that I've never even thought of, but super valuable. Finding organizations or finding individuals who have a large client pool, that's a great way to attract business. If you have one person, but that they can become a regular, that's so great. Hey, I have this event room in the back, or I have some space here we can cordon off, or, we have the atmosphere that you can bring your clients in. That's such a valuable tool that I've actually never even thought of that anyone could very easily use.
For sure. And you got to think about the people that are feeding, right? Think about the folks that are like pharmaceutical reps. They're bringing food to every single office that they stop at. So it's saying, hey, listen, I'll create a package for you to make it work within your budget. And then that way they look like a hero, because one, they're staying in their budget that they have to tide for, but they're being able to bring it to the office. And it just it continues to give, right? It's all about those relationships and harboring and sort of creating these really great, unique experiences for everyone you work with.
Awesome. What's the large scale dream of Gwin's Tiny Kitchen?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would love myself to open a cooking school. Right now, my current set of dreams is, making these culinary trips that I'm creating sort of continue to take off, to be able to do one a quarter, not just internationally. So right now I'm building one for Portugal. I'm taking a trip next month to kind of go vet and interview and meet other vendors over there to kind of create these experiences. But I'd love to have a cooking school that kind of ranges and offers a variety of different classes as well. So that's the long-term goal of it. And then also creating a space too for other entrepreneurs or other people that are really excited and want to have that opportunity. Because if you're trying to start out, it's hard, right? It's hard. There's not a lot of options to learn, how to read a P&L. How do you build this? How do you understand what your food cost is? And then trying to find a rental space that works, right? And so that's the long-term goal, right? To eventually have a facility that can not just empower people with home cooking, but also empower professionals and future entrepreneur chefs to have a place to kind of call home and craft their own business there too.
Awesome. Love it. I love it. Great dreams. I mean, helping out the future, planning such a large scale venture, but it can certainly be accomplished, right?
It comes down to time management. Making sure all your calendars are synced together. So, but yeah, I think over time, and I would say the biggest thing for me is just what I have learned in my 4 years of running Gwin's Tiny Kitchen is just to pause and reflect. Right? There's so many times that you feel like we just got to keep going, but taking a moment to pause and think what's been working, what's not working, what's been beneficial, and what do you want to keep going, right? So over the last 4 years, it's evolved. When I first started, obviously virtual classes were huge. But now no one's really interested in them, right? We're all done. We're all zoomed out in some way, shape, or form. And we're longing for those personal connections. So sort of pivoting and offering that a little bit more and pulling back on some other pieces of it. So, I think the biggest death to any business is the phrase, well, this is how we've always done it. And I think that, just kind of always being open and flexible to change is a big key for a lot of things.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely a great point. You always have to be flexible in the organization. You have to make sure, having a standard practice and a standard business model is solid. And that's the way that you kind of have scale. But especially in the beginning, you've really got to kind of flush out what exactly is working, what's not working, and then change with the times.
Right.
All of these major enterprises, they understood the fact of, all right, this is what we're doing. This is what's positive. This is what's negative. Let's do less of the negative and more of the positive. And then kind of you organically scale in that direction.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
And then can you tell me a little bit about your podcast itself?
Yeah. So I was working with PBS and doing local food podcasts. It was called Chewed in the Loo. And so we did a series of not just the food culture here in St. Louis and the individuals that make it up, which is very powerful. I feel like St. Louis is such a underrated food city, but we can compete with some of the best ones out there. We've got some really fantastic James Beard nominated and awarded chefs that are here, but just the beautiful interlacing culture that runs throughout the city. So it was highlighting that as well as sharing, the things that were within season. So we'd focus on things like during the fall, apples, right? The understanding the history of apples and how it kind of translated across the board. So that is just basically food, a love story to food in St. Louis is kind of the podcast.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's super, super awesome. And then I know that you talked a little bit about your restaurant experience, kind of making your way up to the general manager. Can you walk me through a little bit about that? Just because I know a lot of our listeners specifically do own restaurants or are interested in starting their own restaurant. And we talk a lot about culture. We talk a lot about the operations. We talk a lot about how a lot of restaurants utilize human resources without necessarily knowing that it's human resources. The recruiting, the training, developing standard operating procedures, making sure that you have that quality control. So that way when you open multiple restaurants, it's not, I have to run to every location and try to run around with the chicken with its head cut off, but actually know that things are getting handled the way that we need them to be handled.
Right. Yeah. I started out when I moved back from LA from Hollywood, the whole media background. It was the recession. So I was I'll just get a job as a host. And then I noticed that, it was a newly opened restaurant and they didn't have anyone structuring their banquet coordinating. So I jumped on that and instantly was working for them as their corporate trainer. So I was going to help open new restaurants that they were opening in different locations throughout the U.S. I was banquet coordinating for them and then just worked my way up the ladder to assistant manager and then assistant general manager and then GM. And in the process of that, I learned a lot, not just about myself and my management style, but I learned a lot as well as about how important SOPs are because they offer you that consistency to hold your staff accountable. And that's key because I think if you don't have that standard line of expectation from them, then it creates that is the biggest drama, let's be honest. And when you work in the restaurant business, you've got two different groups of people, front of house, back of house. You got your introverts, your extroverts. And so over the time, I kind of really took a lot of pieces from psychology. I really deep dived into psychology and sociology studies and just understood what drove people. What was their motivation, right? Because not every person that walks in your door as your employee is motivated the same way. And so being able to kind of find that piece and individualize it for them. And when I took over as a GM, I was able to transform a lot of the culture by being able to hold everyone. Most of the time that back of house, those line cooks, those prep cooks, we don't have the same encounters with them like we do with the front of house staff, right? Front of house staff, we're sitting down and we're talking sales, we're talking, guest experiences. Whereas back of house, it's very much here's your checklist. Let's call orders to you. But we're not sitting down with them a lot of times and saying, hey, what are your goals? Do you want to learn another station? what motivates you to come in and do your job every day at the best of your ability? Or what are your frustrations, right? I sat down as a GM and I said, okay, let's talk through this. And I also made a big part of my job, making sure that every single manager worked a front and a back of house shift, which was unusual at the time. But I really felt strongly that I can't hold my back of house accountable if I don't understand what they're going through, how their day works, right? So I'd work shifts with them on the line and understand that, like, okay, the way that we have this layout back here, it doesn't work. So let's figure this out. Let's troubleshoot this. Give me your insight. And I think that's what got a lot of buy-in from the staff, with being able to say, okay, let's all lead to success. So I think involving a lot of them is a big piece of it. And a lot of times we don't get that in the restaurant business. It's come in, work your shift and leave. You don't get that buy-in from your staff, right? It's, everybody's motivated by different ways, but I think if they have a way to know that they're being heard or someone's taking the time to notice them, it gives you a completely different work environment and a completely different buy-in from your staff too.
100%. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that accountability, especially, like, I think that is such a powerful tool in itself, because training development has to be there. Like, you have to have the standard operating procedures in place, but then you also have to have the performance management, right? Like, you have to make sure that you're holding your team accountable to the standards you set. Otherwise, as soon as you turn around, they're doing whatever they were doing before.
Right.
And then recruiting, having a full staff, it's really, really hard to be able to focus on the big picture when all you're doing is putting out fires because, this person called out or that person quit again. And, turnover in restaurants is so high. And one of the reasons is that it's, you're not holding everyone accountable. Sometimes you have your stud of a server and you might let them get away with one or two things just because, they're great when they are there. And then you have someone in the back who is just awesome whenever they're there. And then sometimes their attendance isn't great. And then, there's always that, you have to have that equal across the board kind of view. And I think standard operating procedures really, really do that. And having, like, I like to say, when I was in the military, like, you'll always fail to whatever level your structure is. The military is filled with people that are just normal people. Like, you would not trust them with a gun in their hands. You wouldn't trust them with absolutely anything. But because everything is so well structured and everyone knows exactly what they're going to do at all hours of the day, it functions. And I think a restaurant is very, very similar to that, in which everyone knows what their function is. And then whenever they don't know what their function is, that's where the issues start to come in. If they're not sure of what they're supposed to do, or they know what they're supposed to do, but they kind of get away with not doing it, that's it. That is where the problems start to come in from.
Exactly. And so for things that we did, just to kind of give some other restaurant people, maybe they're like, where do we go? How do we start? I think checklists are so important, right? Like in your checklist for, like, here's your opening duties. Here are all the expectations that we have, right? We had every server come in and we check them down the line. Okay, we check their uniform, right? Here, iron shirt, great. Hey, your shirt's not iron, great. In the back, I've got wrinkle release. Let's go get you looking nice and clean. They knew that before they started their shift, before they checked in, before they got in their section, we were going to quiz them. And I think having that stop point really kind of made a lot of people, one, mentally prepared, but two, no, I can't just roll into work and go and make my, $200 shift and leave. They knew that, hey, I'm going to walk in, they're going to ask me, and if I don't have it, then I'm going to have to go find my pins. I'm going to have to go find another apron. And so I think accountability is key for anything at any level, professionally and personally, with it. Is key for any success. And I think with that note too, it's not holding them to perfection level, but it's holding them to the level of saying, okay, I see where you're at, because we're all human at the end of the day, right? We are all going to walk through life. We're going to have some hard days, but it's offering them some grace and saying, okay, guess what? Listen, I got a stain remover in the back. I see that your shirt still has ketchup stain from last night. I know you didn't wash your shirt. Go in the back and get that cleaned off. Right. So I think it's little things like that you can hold them accountable, but still offer some grace with that accountability, and offer them, don't just scold them for their mistakes, but offer them a way to progress and move forward with it. Because I think that's a big key that misses. We're so willing to sort of crucify someone for a mistake or a wrongdoing, as opposed to saying, hey, you know what, I see that happened. You had a bad day. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. Let's move forward. Let's move on with this. So offering the grace with the management is big key to success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the big things as far as the HR practices there, it's really like the carrot and the stick. Realistically, when people think of HR, they think of like hiring, firing, and recruiting. But it's so much more than that. There's 7 core functions to HR. And one of the things I think is the most valuable and one of the most undervalued and most underused is employee relations. It's speaking to your team. What exactly do they want? Do they have a track record for their career? Like, do they know, today I'm a server, but I know that, in a few months, if I do a good job, I could potentially be the next step up. And then the next step up to being the general manager, or maybe owning your own franchise, or, being in charge of your own location. Like, having the goal being something farther out, that's where the carrot is, right? Trying to follow that. Then the stick comes from that accountability, right? Making sure that everyone knows what they should be doing. But like you said, meeting them where they are, right? Like, everyone is human. They're going to make mistakes. No one is going to be perfect. And it's unrealistic to hold them to that standard when it's just not there.
Right.
But meeting them exactly where they're at, helping them out. And sometimes that's all you need to have someone's complete attitude change, right? Having a huge 180 just because, oh, my manager saw me, like they cared about me. I also really, really liked your discussion as far as having like those questionnaires in the beginning. UPS and like other organizations, they have that. Like, they'll walk around and like you'll have tests, and then they have like employee like bucks where you give them to the team members, and they can like purchase something from like the little store that's there. It's like sodas or like a drink or candy or like a hat, stuff like that. But I think that's a great tool. Like, that's a fantastic way to like always make sure that they're on it. Like, as soon as you come in here, you're going to get asked, where's your pens? Where's your aprons? You might get asked like, hey, what are we like? What are the specials that we're pushing out today? What are we trying to really focus on for these desserts? So I think that's an absolutely great way to do it.
Yeah,
go.
Oh, I was going to say, it's also a great tool if you're noticing that you're having repeat problems with things ringing up, right? Or errors. It's a great way to kind of like have that conversation without really having that conversation, because sometimes you can make those blanket statements to whole staff, and then everyone internalizes and makes their own sort of narrative on it. Like, oh, did I do that? But then just say, hey, can you tell me how to ring up, like, I want a chopped salad, add chicken, and then see how they do it and be like, here's actually how we want to do it, right? Here's so it's a training moment within a questionnaire. So it was, amazing. Describe this dish. So it wasn't, oh, I don't know, let me go ask, or, oh, it's good. It allows a little bit more depth and knowledge and buy-in through everybody throughout. So yeah, sorry to interrupt. But
No, you're good. So the next stage, as far as like you kind of expanding, doing more traveling, stuff like that, are you going to start implementing a little more recruiting? Are you going to try to build out your team? Or are you trying to do the solo entrepreneur life a little bit longer?
I definitely, for some of the facets, the small business private chefing is continuing to take on a lot of people asking for it. And yes, definitely with that. I think some of the things are solo operating, like my culinary teaching. It's kind of hard to bring more people in. I have programming starting for some of the schools. So some of that, yes, I'm hoping to bring into for some of the school and children programming. But I think for me, I want to make sure that I have my SOPs put in place. I'm not just going to bring someone in and sort of, hey, follow me and expect them to be me. I think I have to build out that curriculum. I have to build out those pillars of what I want consistent across the board to bring and recruit more people in. So it's in the process of building. I think right now, it's seeing what works, what doesn't work, and continuously building on that before pulling more people in and doing more with it. But yes, the goal is to keep growing, keep bringing people in, keep sharing the love.
Awesome. I love it. And then talk about some of your travels. I know that you said that you've gone through St. Louis itself, tried a lot of different food, but I know you've also traveled kind of around the world trying different things. You mind telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I last summer this time I was in Tanzania. So I went and did a safari through Tanzania, but visited resorts, right? And then I'd go and poke my head in the kitchen and talk with the chefs. And I had one chef actually give me a recipe for the chicken dish that we love so much, and I love it because for me that's joy. When someone's sharing a recipe with you, that is pure love. Right. But then it was also walking around and learning about their gardening practices, their total sustainability efforts they have on their resorts and how they're, everything is staying there. And then also how they give back to the villages. So, Africa, I did Europe. I did a food tour with a chef coast to coast through Norway. She's the food expert there. So part of it is just really kind of seeing everybody's got food everywhere throughout the world, and it's just understanding how we've all influenced each other. So the one trip that I'm taking next month in October to Portugal, a lot of people don't think that Portuguese cuisine is like a big landmark, right? We think we're all familiar with Italian and French, right? Like we think that that's like most French cuisine is taught in culinary school, right? A lot of those basis to a really good mother sauce is French based, but Portugal actually has more influence on the world culinary wise because of the great exploration, right? This age of exploration when all of these explorers went out and tapped into the Americas and Africas and Asias. And so then you start to see this intercrossing of resources, right? Like you start to see things like tomatoes that are brought over from the Latin Americas that are now in Europe, right? And so it's kind of going back and seeing like, oh, things that we associate now with certain cultures and certain cuisines didn't start here, but they were brought over, and just seeing kind of like that evolution of it. So for me, it's diving into the history, understanding all of those pieces. We did a food tour through Italy, to kind of doing one right now. I'm building one right now for the Kentucky Bourbon Trails, to kind of understand that, like, hey, it's a dry county, but it makes some really great bourbon and whiskey. So let's figure out how and why that happens and how we got here. Because those are all interesting facets to life. And it's a basis of learning, right? Because some of those things I've been able to pull back and just say, oh, African cuisine, if you were to ask someone what you think it tastes like, right? Or what you think that the main pillars of it are, it's got a lot of Indian influence. It's got a lot of European influence in it. But it's some of the best food that you'll ever have in your whole entire life. It's the most flavorful thing ever. So I go on the trips and I kind of make these connections, but then I come back and I teach classes on those too. So even if you can't come on a trip, you still have the opportunity to come and do a 2.5 hour cooking class with me and get to sample the food and hear about it and learn about it. So those are just, in a nutshell, some of the things.
Well, no, that's awesome. I really like how you interweave, the geography, interweave the history, and then the science all into like the culinary experience. I think that's really, really powerful. A lot of times when you're sitting in school and you're just looking at something or you're reading a book, it's not the same. But being able to smell something, to actually work with your hands, and then kind of take in all that information, I think that actually makes it stick a lot better.
Oh, for sure. I agree with that. Especially someone like I'll admit it, I'm full ADHD. I was ADHD back in the 80s, not this like current day social media diagnosis. But I think being able to have all that textile, it stays with you a little bit more. And it kind of has a little bit more, it's memories attached to it, experience attached to it. You'll recall that way more than reading something in a textbook. So I love it.
Awesome. Love it. And then if you had one thing that you would tell someone who's either just starting their business journey or who is a veteran who's been in the restaurant game for a little bit, what would you kind of recommend to them to push their restaurant forward?
Oh, I would say the biggest thing is the two parts. One, quality of life. You don't have to be married to your business 70 hours out of the week. Sometimes you feel like you can't ever leave. You have to be there in order for things to run. But at the end of the day, you're burning your candle down. And I think that it's a matter of balancing the work and the life. And if you can do that, then you'll see you'll have far more success in both aspects of life than just focusing on the one. I think the second thing is, I think managing with grace. And I know that I've already kind of talked about that. But I think grace is a big key to a lot of things. Allow people to make mistakes, allow failure, because if you can do that, then you're allowing an atmosphere for growth and learning, and not associating it like failure to be with shame, to be failure as a positive thing with growth. Because if you can do that, then you're going to have a lot more people that are going to be in your corner and a lot more people that are going to appreciate the environment that you're creating, as opposed to the typical restaurant environment sometimes where it can feel really shameful and guilty and very high intense. So yeah, allow failure and growth to be a pillar of learning.
Awesome. I love it. And they're perfect as far as like explaining it and the way that people really do feel like that's acceptable, specifically in a restaurant. Like when you look at traditional businesses, like, berating your employee or like yelling at them, or like the old school way of doing, like, running a restaurant, that doesn't really fly anymore in the corporate side. It's really only in restaurants that's considered okay. And it's just really, really interesting that the restaurant industry never really adopted more of like the softer hand. I think nowadays it is a lot more. And I think a big reason for that is because the team members, they're forcing it. Like they're like, no, you're going to respect my time. You're going to accept me for, kind of who I am. And then we have to kind of find that balance from there. It's really important that it's not just pushing through, and it's not just, this is how we're doing it, and you will either do this or you will like not work, because you can't really run a business like that, not anymore at least.
For sure. I will say that I think COVID really transformed so many things in the restaurant industry. And I know that we're feeling the hardship of it by not having staff available to work. But I think in the same respect too, I think it really kind of shifted a lot of that mental health capacity that you can get from working in the business. But I will say there's such a beautiful thing working in the restaurant business. It's unlike anything else. It fulfills you. I would say the saddest part I had when we closed was missing all of my regulars, missing all of my staff that I would see every day. And so embrace the humans, or embrace the people that are there, because those are the ones that are making your business succeed. So.
Awesome. I love it. And tell our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your podcast? If they wanted to book a culinary class, where could they find you?
Sure. So I have a landing page, gwinstinyKitchen.com. So you can hop on there. You'll see obviously my storefront, all of my upcoming classes that I teach throughout St. Louis, but mainly at Kitchen Conservatory. And then the podcast is also linked through there as well. You can look for Chew in the Lou and listen along and hear all about the amazing food scene in St. Louis.
Well, if you stuck with us this long, I truly appreciate it. If you like the content, please rate the show. And if you're feeling a little crazy, maybe share it with someone.